These days, a lot of companies are trying to make their games more accessible. They do this sometimes by severely dumbing down their games or by including tutorials that are practically patronizing and kind of hold your hand through the experience and talk to you as though you've never played a game in your life. And for some players, that's probably very helpful. So meanwhile, there's something to be said for games that seem squarely intended for kind of hardcore players of the genre, for people who've been playing similar games for many years. Disgaea is such a game. If you've never played other previous strategy RPGs from Final Fantasy Tactics to Atlas's own Hoshigami and Tactics Ogre, then Disgaea really is not for you at all. It's a game that relies on your knowledge of similar games. Your knowledge of games like this is going to be what makes Disgaea instantly appeal to you. It's also going to be what makes Disgaea unique for you, because even though it resembles games like Final Fantasy Tactics, it's actually quite a bit different. So if you're a fan of this particular style of gaming, not just role-playing games in general, but strategy RPGs in particular, then consider Disgaea one great big thank you card for your ongoing support. Once you get past the superficial resemblance between Disgaea and most other games of this type, you'll find that this is actually a very different style of game, right down to the premise. In the game, you play as Laharl, who's this kind of brattish young demon who awakens after a long slumber to find that his father, the previous overlord of the Netherworld, is dead, and so he sets out to assert his rightful place as the lord of basically all of Hell. He'll do this with his kind of not-so-trustworthy vassal Etna in tow, and really the storyline and the interactions between characters in Disgaea are actually pretty hilarious sometimes. It's a game that's filled with some really, really goofy, kind of self-referential and sometimes pretty brazen Japanese-style humor, so if you're a fan of kind of a wacky anime humor, then this game is just going to be perfect for you. Also, it may be good for something like 200 hours of gameplay, so if this is the sort of thing that is exciting to you rather than scary, then again, this is a sign that Disgaea is a game for you. This is basically the RPG hardcore power leveler's dream game. If you're the sort who likes to max out your characters, and if you're the sort who, even after you've finished the main quest, you're not actually done playing because you're still going to fight stuff and gain monsters and find all the strongest weapons and all that, again, Disgaea is going to have a lot to offer you. In this game, you can not only drag your character's experience levels into the hundreds, but eventually even into the thousands. You can create some truly disgustingly overpowered characters. The designers pretty much threw game balance out the window, and in so doing, the game kind of goes full circle and becomes weirdly balanced in and of itself, because to get your characters that powerful, you're still going to have to spend a lot of time leveling them, doing all kinds of stuff like that. So you'll still be, experiencing the game, playing it, having fun with it, even if you get to a stage where you can completely trash all the bad guys that the game has to offer you. Then again, the game is pretty much always going to be one step ahead of you in some areas, and no matter how powerful your guys get, you're always going to have a tough fight waiting around the next corner if you so desire. The main strategy in the game, such as it is, revolves around, kind of beating the system like this and figuring out the best, fastest ways of leveling up your characters. In terms of the individual tactical battles, those themselves aren't very strategic. If you equip the right items, you don't have to worry so much about things like running out of spell points, and it uses a true turn-based system, so your guys always go first and then the enemies go and so forth. Strategically, the game isn't very complex, but there is this kind of overarching strategy where you're trying to maximize your time while playing. That's really quite interesting. In a word, the game is weird. It's got some weird features both in combat and outside of it. During combat, one of the stranger things that all your characters can do is pick up and throw one another as well as their enemies. So, in theory, your piddly first-level mage can pick up and throw a 1000th level demon lord 5 spaces on the isometric map. It doesn't make any intuitive sense, but the game sort of sets itself up as an anything goes style of environment, because this is the neither world and no laws apply. So it actually kind of makes a strange sort of logic in the context of the game, the fact that you can do these sorts of things. You'll also see these prism-shaped objects on the map sometimes, and these might cause certain squares on the map to have certain types of effects. For example, if you're standing on a red square, you might have 2 attacks per round, or you might get double experience, or you might just randomly teleport somewhere, or you might be completely invincible. It really adds some kind of much-needed chaos to the proceedings and creates a lot of variety in the level design between the different maps. Outside of combat, you can consult with the Dark Assembly, which is basically the demonic senate, and you could also take a trip to Item World. The way that works is every item, according to Disgaea, includes its own kind of interdimensional world filled with enemies. So you could take your sword, hop into it, and all of a sudden you're engaging in these series of increasingly more difficult tactical battles that are randomly generated, and each time you either clear a map or get to the exit, if you can't beat all the monsters, your item's going to go up a level. The Dark Assembly is pretty interesting too. You can petition this panel of demons to grant you certain bonuses or to expand the selection in your shops, things like that, and if they're leaning against your particular petition, then you could try to bribe them by giving them items. And this is also where you create new characters. You basically can unlock new character classes by leveling up the starting classes, and there are dozens of different classes in all. And while each new character you create starts off at first level, by incorporating them into your combo attacks during battle, you can level them up really quickly as you defeat increasingly more powerful foes. Disgaea has a really loose kind of feel to it. You feel as though you're tricking the system as you play. There are a whole bunch of little loopholes in the gameplay that you can exploit, and yet the game somehow manages to be challenging regardless, and the plot is very self-referential about this, because Laharl and Etna are always talking about fighting dirty and so forth. So somehow, again, it seems very conscious that the game has these certain what could be perceived as shortcomings in other types of games, but it takes it all in stride. It's all there for you to experiment with and kind of goof around with, and in so doing, you can literally spend many, many dozens of hours. It'll take you about 40 hours just to complete the main quest, and you've barely even scratched the surface if you want to keep going from there. So again, if you're a fan of strategy RPGs, if you like to level up your characters in these types of games and to really dig in and learn everything about the system and see every last item, and especially if you like kind of goofy, wacky anime humor, then Disgaea is just going to be the perfect game for you. It's a game that you could play for many, many weeks, and it's fortunate that there are still publishers in this day that can produce these types of games instead of kind of the dumbed-down, newbie-friendly types of games that are squarely intended for people other than those of us who've been playing tons of games like this and appreciate what games like Disgaea truly have to offer.